Oneida County Legislator George Joseph on the line right now. Remember that program, George? It would always be on after Disney, or maybe it was before Disney, on Sunday nights, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Never missed it. What a segue to get into this other topic.
Yes, we had to have a segue. Good. You always need a segue. All right, so Kim Strong from Laney's Army was somewhat critical of you and farmers in general for wanting to table this animal abuse registry list that County Executive Anthony Pacini and Sheriff Mayfield have both proposed for the legislature. What's the worry here? What are you concerned with, and what are farmers concerned with, George?
Yeah, well, Bill, anytime we have a local law, or any law for that matter, we really should look at all the consequences. And in this case, there's really two parts to it. And the part that, and I think it was even on your show, the DA was on, and I think there was a misconception because I think he even said that it didn't apply to, it was for companion animals and
right.
dogs and cats.
It didn't apply to farmers.
When we discovered that, no, it was for all animals. It was a blanket mammal category. We did raise some questions about farms. Farms are operated entirely different than, the regular network to buy and sell animals. And the registry was probably one of the biggest concerns, and the onus is on the seller
right.
as much as it is on the convicted person. And look, nobody endorses cruelty in any shape.
Sure.
But in this case, it was an onus that was being placed on the whole supply chain for the farm, as well as the business aspect of, many farms are partnerships. And if for whatever reason you had associations, it could be connected with that.
Yeah,
so,
I guess part of my question would be, where do you? I have a lot of questions, but how do you differentiate who is a farmer? And because especially today, when you have a lot of people that are that raise chickens, but they're not necessarily a farm, or someone who decides we're gonna create a coop and we're going to raise turkeys so that next year for Thanksgiving we're going to have a fresh turkey. They butcher their own turkey. There are people out there that would find that to be inhumane. And are these people potentially subject to this? Yeah,
well, we in some of our research, we actually did look at a few of the other counties that have the same or similar law.
Yeah.
And in the ones that we've picked out as a model, they've actually defined what a farm animal is and excluded it from this registry and this law. So, the law will go through. We're just amending it to,
Well, here's another question. The way I understood this law is that if someone is convicted of animal abuse, they would go on this list. So does the law change the law on what constitutes animal abuse and what someone can be charged with when it comes to that? Basically, does it define animal abuse?
Animal abuse is defined by state law, ag and market law.
Right.
So this really has, that doesn't change at all. That's always going to be there, and it's fully defined.
Okay.
And so this was just an add-on to for the registry, for those convicted of that crime.
All right.
So what part are you going to amend?
We're going to insert an amendment to exclude farm animals, and there'll be a definition of farm animals, and that'll be just it'll be excluded from the general part of this.
And that's where my confusion comes in. So if someone is, tell me if I have this wrong. So if a farmer or anyone is convicted of abusing a farm animal, they would not go on this list?
The requirement of being on a registry and all the prohibition that goes with the registry. The prohibition is that you can never buy another animal.
Okay.
And so from that perspective, you're gonna tie a farm organization possibly. Now, let's be real. Farmers that make their money off their animals are probably the best caregivers of their animals.
Right.
So, we're stretching it a little bit beyond. But just think about it. Most farm animals are bought through networks, either through like Burton Livestock, where it's an auction, and you may have 300 transactions in a day and multiple animals or more.
Okay,
to
so
have a registry
Yep.
and have an onus on that person to check the registry, it's a burden.
And I'm going to play a little devil's advocate here because I can't imagine. So every once in a while you find a story about a farmer who somehow has gone by the wayside. The animals have been starved. Someone comes in and they end up being charged with animal abuse. Do we want that person who is an irresponsible farmer not to be on the list? Shouldn't they be prohibited from having farm animals down the road?
Yeah, there's laws against that, but in most cases, Bill, I'm going to tell you that it's typically a mental illness that has led to that kind of deprivation of care for an animal. And, it's a whole other problem that should be addressed.
And isn't it possible that a judge could say a part of the sentencing, if it was mental illness or it was maybe a chemical abuse of some sort, that a judge could rule as part of the sentence, you're no longer allowed to own farm animals? I mean, I think a judge could rule that as a punishment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
On a singular case, absolutely. They'll intervene in that way.
Yep. Okay.
Anytime, I shouldn't say anytime. Most times when you have somebody who's abusing animals, there's a mental health issue. And, the DA had talked about that.
Or a drug issue.
Or a drug issue. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So my other question is this.
Or you're a deviant and you're next going to be a serial killer.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's obviously there's some mental issues there. So, George, are you saying that you'll pass it, but you will also amend the part about the obligation that is on the seller of animals, dogs and cats, breeders, whatever? Are you okay with that part, or you want that taken out, where they are basically now required to check this registry to see if I'm allowed to sell a dog to, John Smith down the road who called me because I put an ad in the paper, type of a thing? Yeah.
No, what our amendment will do is just exclude farmers from this law.
All right.
Okay.
So that's a whole separate. It'll be a separate issue. Ag and markets can deal with any of those issues.
Okay.
But it just excludes farmers.
Okay.
And I'd like to point out that and I have not had the opportunity to talk to Kim, but the SPECA and as well as the pet industry, there's a pet industry joint advisory council, really came out against this registry. And in spite of the fact that many of the counties have it. And so, there was a lot of input from the stakeholders that weren't always, let's go for it, So it's kind of an emotionally driven law. And that's why, I felt it was time to take a timeout. Let's reflect on it. And we don't want to have to amend it like we've had, to do on some of the other similar laws we've done with, they were good intent, but didn't really think them out and amended them. So it was just, let's make it, if we're going to put a law in the books, let's make it a good law.
What's the SPCA's objection?
Well, you put there again, they're in the business of caring for animals and wanting the best care for animals, but there were about 8 items that they were concerned with, and one of them was the fact that they were put in a position of being the arbitrator of somebody coming in for an animal after they've promoted it. And having to say, no, you can't, and they felt uncomfortable, a little comfort level there. They think education and time spent and money spent in this whole registry, it would be better spent in education and try to, get people to, be more aware.
I can see why they would have a problem because it puts them in a position where they kind of have to police this themselves. And
Right.
A final question without splitting hairs here. You've defined the animals, and you're excluding farmers. So what is the definition of a farmer today? It seems to be that is a pretty broad term. So how do you define that?
Yeah, actually, Ag Markets does determine a farm by actual dollars of transaction, but in this case, I think it's more defined by the type of animal,
Okay.
a hooved animal or a clove hoof animal.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, I think this clears it up. When do you think this will end up getting ultimately passed, revised, and then passed?
This will come back out the next board meeting in June, and it'll come back out, and the amendment will be offered and hopefully supported, and then the law will be passed.
Okay. All right. George Joseph, as legislator, thanks so much, as always. We appreciate your time. You're getting into, finally, it looks like maybe the weather turns a bit this weekend, finally getting into decent spring season coming up for your business.
Well, one more week of this rain, and it will be impacted. But, yeah, we're right on schedule, and it's still mid-May. But I think all farmers are kind of anxious to be able to get out in the fields.
No doubt about it. George, thanks for taking the time.
You're welcome.
All right.
Bye.
George Joseph. Got a break at WIBX.